urge without looking.
When it comes to video games, there are a lot of different examples of good and bad within them. But every Half-Life and Baldur's Gate 3 and their monumental achievements within the gaming industry, there are games that flop like a fish, such as Superman 64 or another god-awful game that revels in being universally hated and generally forgotten. Like how I have, baby! Video games as a whole have had a long history of being in a very yin-yang-esque situation, if you may. Of there being absolutely amazing games that come out and people will talk about for years after its release, and others being complete flops that are forgotten or laughed at regularly, some for better or for worse. There is one series that I feel exemplifies this yin-yang relationship a lot. A series that has gone through and survived its dark ages multiple times. A series that has risen from the ashes and still stands tall to this day. And that series is Sonic the Hedgehog.
One of the greatest and most attractive characters ever thought up.
Over the years, Sonic as a franchise has had a rocky history in the official scene. From games like Sonic 06 being universally hated and generally memed to death for how bad it is as a game. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have games like Sonic Frontiers, Sonic Unleashed, and hell, even Sonic Mania, which have amazing receptions from the fans and are loved to bits. Sonic Mania is an interesting example though, as it wasn't entirely developed by Sega themselves. Fans of the Sonic series were involved through people like Christian Whitehead, as an example, who is known for making ports of classic Sonic games to mobile devices. Fans made what is considered to be one of Sega's best games in the classic genre of the series. Fans. Fans are an interesting part of Sonic's legacy that a lot of people tend to ignore or overlook due to many reasons that I will not go into. But Sonic fans are generally some of the most talented people I've ever seen on the internet. There are a variety of reasons for this. One point that everyone can agree on is that Sonic fans can make some impressive things, from art to animations to even in the realm of creating video games too. These video games being Sonic fan games. Sonic fan games are one of the core parts of the Sonic community, and are something to really be talked about much more from a general standpoint when talking about the community from an outsider's perspective. I love Sonic a lot, and I've played through his games for years now, but even I have to admit, the fans do such a great job with a lot of these games. A lot of Sonic fan games are enjoyable experiences, in terms of 2D or 3D games. They're all enjoyable, except for Sonic Omens, am I right? And there are some extremely talented faces within the community that make these games special. Games like Sonic and the Fallen Stars, Sonic after and before the sequel, and even fan-made remakes of official Sonic games like Sonic P06 or Sonic Riders Evo. They do a great job at fixing or making the official titles by Sega just so much better, even if most of them are in early stages or never really finished. There is one Sonic fan game, however, that I personally hold a very special place in my heart for. This is a game that I love to bits. A Sonic fan project that has been around for years that I think should be talked about more. The Sonic fan game known as Sonic Roboblast 2. Sonic Roboblast 2, or SRB2 as it is colloquially known as, is a Sonic fan game that runs on the Doom engine. Whilst this video is not on the game, I bring up SRB2 for a very good reason though. SRB2 birthed a fan project. A fan game of a fan game, if you may. One that is more of a spin-off than anything else. Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce to you Sonic Roboblast 2 Kart. Sonic Roboblast 2 Kart was a fan-made racing spin-off to SRB2 developed by Kart Crew, a game that has a lot going for it with great gameplay, challenging time trials, and even online and mod support. Unfortunately, a few years ago, Kart Crew stopped development entirely on SRB2K. However, there was something new cooking though. A new game by Kart Crew with a few teasers here and there, but nothing more expansive than that. All we knew was that it was going to be a new update for SRB2K that was in the works, an update that evolved into its own game. It set out to be a new version of Kart that was going to change the game forever. It was going to transform the fan game many knew, and in some cases, it would be
racing at the next level. Dr. Robotnik's Ring Racers. Out now for home computers everywhere.
Released in April 2024, Dr. Robotnik's Ring Racers, or just simply Ring Racers, is a Sonic fan game and evolution of Kart's pre-established gameplay. A game that, in my honest opinion, could be a standalone project without the Sonic influences involved inside of it. It's a game that I, alongside others within a small community that has garnered around the game, enjoys. This enjoyment is what inspired me to make this video, and has also inspired me to express my thoughts on the game as a whole, even the more extensive thoughts on when the game has its less proud moments. As a game, Ring Racers has a lot to offer positively, such as the new ring mechanics and tricks, but also has a lot of negatives that dampen the experience or deprive it of fun, such as certain track designs and the hellish CPU AI. And that's what I'm going to kind of talk about today in this review, whilst obviously being as unbiased as possible. So, without further ado, I believe it's time we rev up the engines and get things moving. First off, I believe it's best to start off with the game's introduction. In my honest opinion, it's quite good. It's not really bad or anything like that, it's just a sort of calm before the storm, if you may. We'll get into that in a bit though. The intro primarily focuses on Dr. Robotnik and Tails, who explain some of the game's lore to Metal Sonic and basically get all your settings, well, all set up. This portion primarily focuses on the aforementioned settings and is presented in this amazing art style, which honestly I just really enjoy. What I don't like is the fact that this section is primarily Tails and Robotnik talking and just kind of explaining about, well, the settings, and also about how they've been working on a kart racing system known as the Ring Racer. Which isn't bad, it's just This entire section is just really these two bozos yapping for 10 minutes before throwing you into hell itself. Can I also just quickly mention the control options? It's honestly a nice touch that Kart Crew decided to go with the Sega Genesis controller for a design idea when coming up with the controller options. However, I do kind of wish the game had options for you to change which controller type was displayed here, as it would be better from an accessibility standpoint. And no, not for mods, I mean more officially by Kart Crew themselves. Now, as for the proper tutorial, this is where this part of the game goes kind of lopsided, let's say. What do I mean by this? I mean that this tutorial is long as hell if you don't know what you're doing. There's no joke to this either. Let me get to it. Don't get me wrong, tutorials can be long, but also insightful on how mechanics of a game work. Take Half-Life's training area as an example. This area blends both a tutorial with world building, where mechanics are told to you in small drips in a short time frame before throwing you into the proper experience. Half-Life's tutorial, at most, takes around 20 minutes to beat. This is not the same with Ring Racers if you don't know what you're doing. This entire tutorial, prior the inclusion of an option to skip it included in version 2.1, which I really appreciate, can be up to an hour long. This entire tutorial doesn't feel like it really teaches you everything the game has to offer on a technical or mechanical level. And even then, most of the tracks don't even use a large majority of what is told to you throughout the tutorial, or you will just never use it, period. We'll get into that later though. I will admit that parts of the tutorial, such as the ring section, do also explain and use some of the items as a means of progression through the area. The use of items such as the gacha bomb for it being used to power switches is a nice touch to adding gameplay elements into progression for this segment. And honestly, I really like it. However, there are some things I don't like here, such as with the springs tutorial where it has a part with 4 spring types that practically makes you guess on which one is the right one to use. I feel it is completely asinine and a really bad part of the tutorial overall. Like, genuinely, who designed this? I understand it's to help people learn about the springs and how they work, but this just honestly isn't it. Whilst we're on the topic of the tutorial too, I believe it's a perfect time to mention about the game's mechanics in a lot more detail, especially since we're going to be talking about races and overall just the core game modes in a little while. First off, let's go over rings. A core mechanic within ring racers are these golden rings. Rings basically act as a source of health within ring racers. You know F-Zero and its energy system? Yes? No? You don't care either way and think it's Mario Kart's coin system? Well, imagine that but mixed with F-Zero's energy mechanics and you get Ring Racer's primary mechanic. During a race, you can have up to 20 rings within a reserve. Pressing the item button without having an item on hand, which for myself and my personal recommendation would be the spacebar if you're using keyboard like myself and my epic gamer skill, will allow you to consume rings for a speed boost. Similar to that in Mario Kart's coin acceleration, but in all honesty, Ring Racers does a better job of it, as while Mario Kart's coins are more of a flat acceleration boost, Ring Racers is more of a timed boost. It's sort of a storage system that honestly is much better in my opinion, and it basically acts as both an accelerator and a life system. Bumping into opponents, taking damage from items, course hazards, and falling off the map like a dumb stupid idiot, like myself, will make you lose rings, which is alright. It's not anything innovative in the year of the Lord 2024 that this game came out in, but it's something that I do think should be brought up either way. I see this due to the fact that once you're at 0 rings or below, you're within an area known as ring debt, where you lose your ability to use rings to accelerate, and contact damage with anybody will make you spin out and lose more rings. Speaking of spinning out as well, whilst in debt, you're vulnerable to a system known as ring sting, something the tutorial briefly mentions but doesn't really use to great effect in all honesty, which is a longer spin out that just honestly sucks and has made me lose races many times in the past due to its inclusion. But at the same time it makes sense, because obviously with no rings to power your cart, it starts to malfunction in a sense. So I guess it's justifiable from an outsider's perspective, but that's just me. Another thing as well, if you are hit whilst at a fat -20 on that ring debt, you're going sky high. Do not worry entirely though. You do have a means of protection whilst in ring debt. Insta-whip, a defensive gamble technique that you charge whilst in ring debt at the cost of going further into debt, in the race mode anyway. On a hit, it sends opponents flying away from you. It's not just for other racers however, as if Ultra Kill taught me anything, you can parry items. This is actually a pretty cool ability, I will not lie, for the gamble you're taking, but obviously it cannot parry everything, only certain items from the set we have, and well, you won't be seeing SPB dodges, which is perfectly fine. The insta-whip is useful. However, in my time playing, I never really found a use for it myself. The only time I really ever used it was for getting through the breakable objects on tracks such as City Escape, with its littered boxes throughout the entire stage. In my personal opinion, it's a cool concept, but just one that I feel could be utilized much more on tracks, but also just in general. Overall, it's one of the mechanics that I never really used, but it's still genuinely a great addition to the game. Alongside insta-whip, you also have mechanics like the emergency brake, performed by pressing your acceleration and brake buttons at the same time, slowing your cart down, and is relatively useful for when you need to slow down before hitting a wall or anything like that. But honestly, there's a better version of it. That better version being in the form of the spin dash. The spin dash is basically a useful speed initiation tool that's great for the start of races, and if you ever need to rebound from doing something like falling off like an idiot, or, well, bumping into a wall and going off course. Or, you know, recovering from an item. I really like this ability, and it's one of the core skills that I found really useful throughout my experience with the game. and it never felt like it went underutilized at all. One of the last two mechanics I'll mention here is the trick mechanic. Tricks are relatively useful on a handful of tracks when they're present, which is a lot of the tracks in the game, just not all of them. Tricks are directional inputs that require you to press the acceleration and a directional button at the same time, which is a welcome change, by the way, from how it was before version 2.1, where it was just a directional input. Tricks are honestly just so cool, and well, there's another technique that does go into it as well. The final one I'll mention here. You see this blue aura when I land from the trick? This is known as voltage. Voltage is basically an acceleration ability, allowing you to burst at high speeds through drop dashing via the spin dash key whilst in the air due to a trick, or by doing a level 3 or higher drift, indicated by the blue spikes for level 3 and the rainbow spikes for level 4, and get a boosted speed whilst performing it. It's one of them abilities that has really helped me a lot throughout my experience with the game, and as well, just leads to situations where you have to ask yourself, do I drop dash and get a speed boost now, or do I save it for later when I'm at a tight turn and I can drift into a boost and steal a higher placement that way? It's a decision that you need to make. Now that we're done with the tutorial for the most part, I think it's next best to talk about the items. A staple of most kart racers like this one. Just like in other kart racers before it that use items such as Mario Kart, there are many items here in Ring Racers that are similar to ones that you most likely know from the aforementioned Mario spin-off series. Sneakers and the rocket sneakers are your mushrooms that can be used to access certain shortcuts that are blocked off by tripwires, which launch you back if you don't have enough speed to pass through. Super rings are coins, but awesome due to the ring mechanics I mentioned before. Bananas are, well, bananas, I don't think I have to explain this one. Orbinauts are green shells, jaws are red shells, and the self-propelled bomb, or SPB as it is commonly known as, is your blue shell, but infinitely cooler than Mario Kart because you can outrun it without using cheap tactics such as using item invincibility frames. There are other items here as well, such as the proximity and landmines being like the bombs, but much more hazardous as they stay on the track for the entire race until exploded. That's not all though, as the shields from Sonic 3 also make an appearance, which I honestly find sick as hell. Working as their respective shields and having effects that are mostly original, except for the Thunder Shield, which is just a discount super horn. Alongside this, Metallic Madness's gimmick from Sonic CD of shrinking and growing through the shrink and growth rays also make an appearance, acting as the lightning bolt and mega mushroom that can be avoided or alternatively mitigated. There are other items here too, but for the sake of time I won't really be mentioning them as much. Outside of talking about the items, how do they actually fare in gameplay? Well, they're pretty balanced, all things considered. Despite the large amount of items, they're all pretty well made and do have their uses here and there obviously, which is pretty cool. A gripe I have though is prevalent in a lot of the items' knockback. The sneakers, invincibility, and even the giant form all have a form of knockback. Speed items and invincibility having insane amounts of collision-based knockback that launches people very far across the stage. A lot of the time, which it just feels a bit too much. I'm going to be completely honest here, because you can just get flung right off the stage or boosted forward to the point you can't readjust before hitting a wall, or even an item that makes you spin out even further. It's especially rough when ring sting is added into the mix. Now before we go to the cup segment of this video, I would like to quickly take a moment to talk about something that will be very important for it. This being Ring Racer's AI, which is... it's genuinely one of the game's deterring X factors to say the least. Generally speaking, I have nothing really good to say about the AI in Ring Racers. It's genuinely one of the most infuriating parts about the game in the Grand Prix mode. I primarily play this game on the Vicious difficulty, which is basically 150cc for Mario Kart but harder, and a lot of the footage from this video is at that speed. CPUs in the Grand Prix have a special quirk as well that just makes them 10 times more painful. So you know how in Mario Kart there's a rival system that makes certain CPUs harder during a Grand Prix? Imagine that, but bumped up to 11 in Ring Racers. Genuinely, the rival system in this game is honestly one of the most mind-numbingly painful things that I have ever had to experience, and is something that has stopped other people that I know from liking this game overall. It's insane to think that the rival system in particular can make courses that are actually fun and somewhat okay to race on an absolute nightmare to play, like you're playing a goddamn Dark Souls boss. Especially with how the rival AI can just randomly clutch up at the end of a race to steal first from you. It's such a mess, and I hate it with a passion, and that's why I'm gonna stop talking about it here. Speaking of courses though, I believe it's time for the main event. The courses of Ring Racers. Like with its contemporaries, Ring Racers has maps that players race on in a selection of cups, and feature 5, except for one cup which features 4, tracks used in races, alongside 2 battle mode maps. There's a lot of good courses here that do have a lot of varieties in aesthetics, and well, just are overall pretty fun to race on, I'm gonna be completely honest here. My favorites being Regal Ruin, I personally just really like Sonic R, Joypolis Zone, Las Vegas, Rumble Ridge, which I will give bonus points to for having a cool visual effect over the screen too, and the entirety of the Phantom Cup as examples. All of these stages are genuinely so cool and are well made too, especially for a Doom Engine game. These are only a small list of the stages I like. There are more that I won't talk about here for the sake of time. To mention about the battle maps real quick before I continue, they're used during the Grand Prix mode as the prison game mode, basically a bonus minigame to possibly gain a life if you break all the capsules in time throughout each stage, and are really well designed and play really well in a lot of cases. I can't really think of any bad ones off the top of my head, and even while writing this script, I still can't. If there is one, then well, there is one. Oh wait, that's right. Alright, I'm gonna be completely honest here. I do not like Sonic Schoolhouse, due to the fact of its moving hazard, Tree Ring Zone due to the fact that it primarily focuses on half pipes and building up momentum in order to hit moving containers, and Malign Egg Shrine due to its moving platforms, making it rather infuriating on prison especially. Genuinely, who thought of these? There's probably more out there that I haven't included here, but that's the main ones that I have thought of. Speaking of lives as well, the Grand Prix uses them as a way to score players on how well they did at the end of the cup itself. The more lives you use throughout a cup, a point reduction is seized. Same with lower placements, how many capsules you destroyed during the prison stages, alongside if you collected a Chaos Emerald during a cup. We'll get back to that in a little bit though. The life gimmick works very much like Super Mario Kart's own life gimmick. Yes, I know, mentioning Mario Kart again, yeah. Lower half of the bracket, you lose a life. It's a really nice gimmick. Going back to the point now with tracks. While there are the good ones that I mentioned here, there are also a small collection of bad ones featured out through some of these cups. Great examples of this are Endless Mine 1 and 2. These stages are not great, both featuring obstacles that act more like an annoyance rather than an actual stage feature, making you lose a lot of momentum pretty quick. Another thing to mention is that both stages also don't really feature any shortcuts, meaning that they're very linear overall, and overall just not fun to play on most of the time. Another great example of a questionable stage is Mega Flying Battery. Why the hell does this stage start off with you in a wind current section that pushes you toward a pit? Why? And even the CPUs agree, as they're just falling off the track at the very start before the race even begins. Like, why? Why does this exist? Yet, there is one course in this game that is very controversial and is one of the worst tracks in the game: the Death Egg Zone.
Now, to defend this track real quick, it's not bad on a fundamental level. It's got a lot going for it in its design, and while yes, it does have that linear feel outside of a few limited shortcuts here and there that use tripwires, one of the main big factors that the track does have that drives people away from enjoying it, no pun intended by the way, is 12 laps. This track is 12 laps long. I say that it's more like a Mount Wario or 3DS Rainbow Road situation where it's split into segments rather than being a full track. Inherently, it isn't bad for a track to follow this segment sort of styling that games like Mario Kart revel in, but it's just handled so badly here. This decision made this track okay to absolute garbage very quick. And it's not like other tracks follow this similar situation, and this is only one of 2 tracks that use the high lap count above 5, the other being Pico Park, which has a total of 8 laps, but it's understandable because it's Baby Park. In the DevX case, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, oh my god, it just feels very underwhelming for a last race in a cup. Segueing away from the main courses now, I would like to quickly talk about the special stages, known in the game as Sealed Stars. While they aren't races, I still feel like it's important to talk about these 14 stages that happen at the end of each cup, if you play really well during the entire thing. Sealed Stars are an interesting take on the special stage formula seen within Sonic games, where you race for a course to destroy a UFO capture with items throughout the course. You use the lives you've collected throughout the course of the cup. If you've been playing really well, you'll probably have around like 7 out of the 10 total lives that you can get, and they act as retries here if you're trying to obtain the emerald. And trust me, you're gonna need them, especially since the UFO decides to play so unfair at times in my honest opinion, and just speeds ahead of you to the point where you can't even catch up in some cases. Even if you do and you break it, you still need to grab the Chaos Emerald itself, which feels like it has the world's smallest hitbox, and in most regards has nearly cost me big time on attempts. The Sealed Stars stages are a real test of your skill and patience, and they're honestly really good, except for Rooftops. That one's just irredeemable. The stages are really well designed in most cases, don't get me wrong, especially with the limitations of working on a modified Doom engine. These stages are amazing pieces of work, and I only really hated one of them. Shoutouts to Church, Courtyard, Venice, Fountain, and Alley, Steeple, and Roulette for being my favorites. Genuinely, they're pretty fun and have good level design to them that works really well in the game's favor and makes them so enjoyable. On the other hand, however, the same could not be said for Rooftops. It is just mildly infuriating for this level to have this bad of a design, and especially the ending. Oh my god, I want to cry. The rest are fine, I guess. They're not exactly memorable for me, but they're not exactly forgetful either. Like I said, they're just fine. In fact, I even had to replay these levels a second time just to be sure I wrote this part of the review correctly. And even I had to rewrite this part since I went on about some of these levels being genuinely the worst thing before replaying them again, just to be certain on my thoughts. Something I failed to mention until now is this game's unlockables, which sort of takes the Smash Bros. And Kirby Air Ride-esque turn, such as spray cans for colors for the racers found throughout the courses, and followers that serve zero gameplay purpose and just, well, follow you around. There's also other unlockables such as new tracks, and even new racers that are from Sonic Media, and even other media owned by Sega themselves like Megami Tensei, Jet Set Radio, and also Puyo Puyo can be also unlocked through the achievements. Honestly, having this representation of creations by Sega and its subsidiary companies in this game scene for unlockables is honestly kind of sick. I'm going to be completely real, and I love it to bits. Even with the followers too, a lot of them are based off of games from around the 90s to early mid-2000s, with Sonic games up to Sonic Adventure 2 being represented as well. It's a love letter in my opinion to a lot of the older titles from around that period. In conclusion, After sinking myself many hours deep into the wacky races of Ring Racers and going through every single cup, collecting all the Chaos Emeralds and also the Super Emeralds as well, and unlocking almost every achievement, my final thoughts on this game are clear. This game's a fun time, and is honestly really enjoyable as a Mario Kart clone, but also as a fan game too. Like I said near the start of the video, Ring Racers could be its own game without the Sonic inspiration, which still rings true even now as we're nearing the end of the video. However, whilst the game is fun, there is definitely some issues that push back on the idea. Now don't get me wrong, most of these issues are related to the single player or a small selection of maps. If you're looking for a casual experience and are familiar with kart racers, I definitely recommend this game to you. Same if you're willing to sit for the tutorial like I did and learn how to play this game, then well, go for it. If you're not or are new to kart racers, I wouldn't recommend this at all. It's a punishing game, and one that even I struggled with at first, and well, I still do now, even with the experience I have from playing a lot of the big hitters in the genre before. It's a game that's very beginner unfriendly, and I would just like to say, play Mario Kart instead of this if you're still new. At the end of the day, I think what I can say is that Ring Racers is fun. It still has a lot of challenge inside of it, but it's a very charming game, and has a lot of things that I like, but the problems are very much evident. Well, with that done, that's the end of our journey across this review. It's been a real blast working on this one, and I want to hear your guys' feedback in the comments, as I want to do more reviews like this, perhaps in the future. I do have a few other videos cooking up in the fryer, and depending on which one is done first, it'll be either a video on Pressure or a video on Ultra Kill. But that's all from me today. This has been Calorina, signing off.